Welcome everyone to our latest CEU on human performance and design presented by Ann Hall, who's an ergonomist. We found her through our IDCEC list of courses and we're looking forward to her presentation. We have about 24 people signed up though, so I'm not sure if we should wait a few minutes to start. Terry, what is your assessment on that?
Anne, would you like to ask any questions of the audience before you begin speaking, and then we can go from there?
Yeah, I would love to.
Oh, beautiful.
Audience.
Everyone, you can turn your mics on, and you can respond directly to Anne during this portion, and then during the presentation itself, we'll ask that you ask any questions or put it in the chat.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me today and letting me join you. I'm a certified professional ergonomist. I work for a couple different ergo groups. I've listed them in different capacities up here. And right now I'm working for Texas A&M University writing a book on ergonomics. So that's been what I've done during COVID since I haven't been able to be with people as much. Let's see. Oops. What I'd like to know from you all is what kind of environments are you most active in designing?
Well, I'm Sharon, and I do large scale food service environments.
Okay.
Such as colleges and university resident dining facilities and military dining facilities and the Olympics. We're working on the Olympics right now. And
wow, interesting.
It's not very romantic. Large scale feeding.
Large scale feed. I'm making notes.
Hi, this is McCall. I work in the hospitality industry, so generally with hotels. So
okay, great.
Guest rooms, dining areas, lounge areas, all kinds of seating applications.
Well, actually, I have some stuff on hotels, and I thought, is anyone going to be designing stuff on hotels? Maybe this would miss the mark. So that's good. That's interesting. What about others?
I'm Donna Godwin. I work in the Washington, D.C. area, do residential interiors, mostly kitchens, high-end kitchens, but a whole lot of people working at home these days in their offices, and they're uncomfortable.
Oh, yes. That's what I'm writing the book on with Texas A&M right now. It's called Work From Anywhere.
Good. Good.
It's addressing that. And that's what makes me nervous every day, because all these ergo groups I work with, they'll say, I just got off the phone with someone with 10,000 employees and they're working at home and they want us to do virtual assessments. How quick can we do 10,000 employees virtually? And it's like, I don't know. And then it hasn't happened yet. I mean, I've done some, but the floodgates haven't opened. But we're seeing in employee satisfaction surveys, the people working from home have a lot of grievances with discomfort.
Yeah.
So I'll touch on that a little bit.
Thank you.
And I think I mentioned to you earlier, I'm into senior living, so I do a lot of senior living facilities. They're common areas and also the residential spaces of clients that have hired me. But I do a lot of the common areas where the dining rooms and the beauty salons and things like that, as well as the actual residential spaces.
Okay, that's good to know. I have a lot in the presentation about work, like when you're a lot of people who are doing commercial interiors for office workers on computers. And they're setting up workstations. So I have a lot of those standards and specifications. I don't know if that might apply to this group or not. So maybe I won't get as far into the weeds with it, but we'll just, when I get there, you all can tell me.
Everybody has an office.
Yeah, well, that's true. And I did put some stuff in just like about mousing that I thought maybe you all could use practically in your own lives, more so than in what you're designing. Also, I'd like to know, in any of the design work you've done so far, have any of you worked with any ergo groups or any ergonomists?
No, I have not.
No. Okay.
Could you define that term for us?
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, please?
Yeah, of course. Let's see. We'll just get right into, oops, there we go. I've got two screens going here. So it's like, why isn't it moving? It's 'cause you're using the wrong mouse. Okay. So I'm actually a designer myself. People are surprised to hear that when they talk about ergonomics. I think the term has become maybe like generic to talk about like products, just like you would maybe the term quality. But what we do is we study the capabilities and limitations of people when we apply it to design. So we either go in at the beginning of design or we come in to evaluate. So a lot of times what happens is design is there and something's going wrong with the human in the space and they call us. So you can see this gentleman right here in the picture. Like if you look at his body posture, I think I need to lower this a little bit. You can see he's twisting. So I went in to redesign this area because they were having a lot of injuries and a lot of employee turnover. So he's twisting to get the cup, and then he's putting this in. Now, if he was doing this once, it would be okay, right? But he's not. He's doing this like maybe twice every minute or once a minute, and he's doing it for a 10-hour shift. So I'm looking at a lot of the body mechanics here to say like, what can I do? And so as part of the redesign, I put in a cup dispenser in front of him so he could reach forward, see how my hands are, and get this. And then his body's not so out of line and it doesn't stress the body so much, and then put it in there. So this is, I know this is manufacturing, which isn't what you're all in, but you can see the extreme posture. And we have these in all sorts of other environments. And I'll talk about hotels in a minute, and you can see that there. So basically what we do as an ergonomist is we study how humans work their best and how they respond to environments. And by knowing people, we try to optimize their setup. So this could be lighting, this could be workstation setup, and even this could be like how on your phone, like apps are used. Because when you have a phone, you're using your thumb, right, to work a lot of it. But your thumb is not the dexterous part. Your fingers are the ones that can manipulate and do fine motor skills, not your thumb. So for software, we would recommend if you're using an app that the things used the most would be closer down so it doesn't strain the thumb. And then you get into things like predictive text and voice text and things that would take less strain off your body, and you may not even know it. And so the end goal for an ergonomist is always the same: improve human performance and preserve health. Does that answer your question about how we design? Okay, I will go on. Let's see.
I think I have everyone on mute right now. So
okay, that's okay.
If they want to verbally answer you, you can just push your space bar and that will mute and unmute you.
Well, I will go on, and if you
Okay.
have questions, then you can ask, okay?
Okay. Do you want to continue, or would you like Sydney to introduce you and kind of tell them what today's program is about?
Well, I did basically. How many people are on right now?
18.
18.
So, yeah, and we're 10 minutes in, so I would definitely.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to briefly say, if anyone has any questions, please type the questions into the chat. I'll be monitoring the questions, and if there's something that's really pertinent that I can interrupt Ann, I will, but I may save them for a break point or a point where Ann says, do you have any questions? Is that okay, Ann?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So we don't get too delayed on the presentation. So thank you all for coming, and here's Ann.
Okay, so basically as an ergonomist, I get to know people, their capabilities, their differences, their limitations, and then I apply it to design. And what we find is if something gives good results and it's easier to operate, then it's more likely to be used efficiently, and people don't take shortcuts like this person who's standing on the counter because she can't reach what she wants, right? So it's not only the design in terms of size of the person, it's also how do they respond to the designs? Will they use it as planned, right? And you can see these two officers, of course, the difference in their height is quite significant, but they have to function in the same space. So same type of vehicle, which is why ergonomists usually would like flexibility in design so we can accommodate more people. So today I'm going to share with you some common limitations we see in spaces that can be alleviated by design. And I'm also going to talk to you about how I, as an ergonomist, approach design. And I hope that you'll think about what happens to your design after you walk away, especially to think, does it make the life better for those who interact with the space? So I'll just tell you a quick story. I don't know if anyone's designing work areas for people who are doing a lot of computer work, but I worked with a large group in Chicago, and it was a big government facility. I mean, I don't know how many employees they had. I would say at least 10,000. And what ended up happening, they brought me in to talk to the facilities department about ergonomics and what that means to employees. And even though they had the ergo group, there was some kind of problem between the design and ergo group. The design group had specified steel case throughout, and it looked very nice. However, I would say about 1 in 8 employees were having problems with the setup. So the ergo group was going in, ripping out the new furniture and putting in another set of furniture that was more ergonomic. And they were frantic because they couldn't keep up. Because what happens when the person next to you gets something new that's more functional? Then you want it too. So this was just like an avalanche of stuff. All the money spent on all that design, and it's being ripped out. And what do you think the design looked like? It was like Frankenstein in there. I mean, there was all sorts of stuff going on. And the worst part, I think, of the whole thing is that it could have been solved with like a little bit more understanding and collaboration from the very beginning, because Steelcase had the same type of stuff that they were ripping out and putting in. So had they done the collaboration in the beginning and figured out what the users really needed, they could have used the supplier they wanted, and they could have had more uniform look and saved themselves, because nobody wants to work backwards. But these people are living in these spaces, so it's really important to them that they're functional. And so as someone who's called in a lot to evaluate how people work in their space, probably more so than I am to go in on new design, I can say the nicest looking spaces aren't always the most functional. And the times when you can be functional and have great design, it's the real magic can happen. So you already know that design's more than aesthetics. It can create mood, perception, but it's the basic building block and the foundation of human performance. And this is your life at home. This is work, and this is also sports. And I promise I won't talk a lot about sports, even though I'm a huge fan of running and biking and all things like this. But you can see so many things influence your performance on courses like this running course. What if this 200-mile race was all on that brick? I mean, it would be a hard course to run. Or what if you were running it in the early morning where the sun's coming into your eyes? It would be a different experience for you than running it like later in the afternoon or when it's really hot. And so there's all these things that can affect your performance on a course. So it's weather conditions, it could be social interactions, how you feel personally yourself. Do you have pressure to make a certain goal? What's the foundation underneath you like? Everything in the environment can affect your performance and your experience. And the good thing is, a lot of times, not often, but well, it just depends on what sport, okay? But people can pick their own course when it comes to that. But when you talk about people at work, they're relying on the company to set them up for a place that they can perform the best. So people are relying on us to help them have the course for how they're going to go through their day. And so when design is good, it really primes them for good performance. but when there's some mishaps, it gives them things to overcome, some limitations. And so looking at this space, I don't know what you all think, if this would be a nice space to work, but I can look at a picture like this, and I highlighted this girl in the gray sweater, and I can say, well, okay, she's facing that window and there's a contrast in light, right? And so that's a lot of direct glare coming straight at her. And then her, well, it's really hard to use a laptop because you can't get in an ergo position, but you can see how low that screen is. So you can see how her head is down. And so she has flexion of the neck. The way that these tables are, when you have sharp edges on a table and people rest their hands, you can get contact stress, right? And that can press the nerves of the body. The chair doesn't have any lumbar support. You can't adjust it higher low to fit the people. And I think with some tweaks, this could be a good space to work. But I think the thing you have to think of is this somewhere you're working 8 hours, or is this just a temporary space? Because if you're only going to work there for 30 minutes or an hour, it could be fine. It's if you're going to work there for the majority of the day and you're going to be interacting with the computer, or it just depends on the task that you're doing. Oops, let's see. Sorry. So 1,700 hours is a lot of time for people to spend at work. Employee isolation, exposure to indoor pollutants, poor postures, lack of physical activity during work hours. Not only does their environment impact their health, it does impact their performance. And you might think, well, my design doesn't create lack of physical activity. That's the nature of the job, right? That's right. But if you know that every person needs a level of activity in their day and their areas are mostly sedentary, then what if you created more places to be active instead of more places to sit? Right? So like this is an outside zone of a company that a lot of times you see is just more places to sit. So they go from their desk to maybe a canteen to sit, or another sitting area, or a place to sit outside. And now we've integrated some activity into it. So we'll talk about this more in depth, but the more you know about humans that will be in the space and what their needs are, then the better chance you have in designing to strengthen their performance. And so when I see like a fixed benching system like this, well, I mean, we already know the orientation of the light is off for this space, but I can look at the armrest and say, okay, this surface is probably going to be too high for the majority of the workers. And so you just have to say, are they doing heavy keying here, or is this where they're just coming and going, right? Do they do very little computer work? And if they do, this area may be fine as is. But if this is a call center, this is probably not the appropriate setup. And when we're thinking about the human, we want to think about all humans interacting in the space. So I work with one ergonomic group, and their main business is helping hotels resolve housekeeping injuries. So you see the top of this headboard structure, somebody has to clean that. And they have to clean that. They have to get up there and dust between every stay, okay? So if the room is too hard on the person physically to clean, they cut corners. And when they cut corners, the room doesn't get clean like it should. And then that rolls over into the guest experience. And you see how these things kind of snowball? So maybe you're designing hotel room interiors and you're thinking about the hotel guest experience and how they're going to interact in the room. But now you might ask your client, who else comes into this space? Could my design help them? So just a little bit more about hotels. Hotel workers have a 40% higher injury rate than all service sector workers. And a lot of that is housekeeping. They're mostly females who work in housekeeping. They clean about 14 rooms or more a day, very high pressure to get it done. A lot of times they're understaffed. But the thing is hotel cleanliness and comfort is rated as the most important factor in hotel selection by guests. So we know it being clean is very important to the hotel and to all the stakeholders, right? But the person doing it is under a great deal of strain. So what if your design not only met other design criteria, but it could help make cleaning the room easier? It would increase speed, efficiency, comfort of the housekeeper. Could that affect the turnover of the staff, the injury rates, cleanliness, rooms cleaned per day? You see how this could add value to the hotel? Maybe they didn't ask about it because they didn't think about it. So this is a picture of some people actually cleaning the space. See how they're having trouble putting the dishes above the sink? And then this is a person trying to clean the headboard. And this, you can see, so now what do you think about these floor to ceiling mirrors? I actually personally love them when I go into the space, but ever since I started working with housekeepers, I see it a little bit different because I'm trying to think they're like Kung Fu Panda trying to scale the walls to try to clean the top of the mirrors and keep them nice and pristine. And this is the wheelchair accessible room. And so, yeah, what they did is you can see they dropped the surface a little bit, the height of the surface, so that the reach is better for someone in a wheelchair, and they've taken out the underneath portion so you can go up to the sink. But how's that person going to reach the dishes? Right? Everything's stored overhead. And so even though you have these standards and these lists of things for design, you also have to think about the human performance in the space. So how does a person interact in this space? And you also have to think, okay, not everybody in the space is in a wheelchair. So let's talk about a senior in the space. And I think, Cindy, you said you're working with seniors. They don't have range of motion, right? So for them to get up and get this dish might be a little bit harder for them. And they also tend to shrink a little bit when they age, the finger dexterity. So what we want to do is create less stress for them and more satisfaction by making things easier on them. And I mean, so you have people in here because they need the handrails who are elderly, guests who are probably larger, bariatric, because the doorways are larger. So the people who use this, it's pretty broad. It's not just a wheelchair, even though it's a wheelchair accessible room. And I just want to stress again, and maybe some people missed it in the beginning, ergonomics is not a product. I know it describes, I mean, I saw a purse, I've seen jeans that say they're ergonomic. It's really a science to be applied. And it's just really about knowing a person and designing for that human interaction. So knowing things like how much noise exposure is acceptable for the hearing, starts to get damaged is important, the optimal lighting and temperatures that the body works best, what body mechanics are good and what could be avoided. And I would think, I don't know as much about dining facilities, but I do know I've been into places like Panera and Starbucks, and I've heard these loud machines, and I'm wondering why they're so close to where people are dining, because I know the decibel levels are probably like 100 decibels, and I mean, exposure on that can start to cause hearing damage. I'll show you the chart on that later. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but there's things that you can do with design that will help protect the humans in the space, and they may not even know it, but they will appreciate it. Part of the process I go through in design is I ask a lot of questions, probably too many questions, where they're like, just go away, because I'm always asking why, especially if there's a problem, because I want to get to the root. Oh, my arm hurts. Well, why? What are you doing? Like, let's go through the stuff. Let's not treat the symptom of the arm. Let's go through and figure out why it's hurting in the first place and get to the root cause so we can eliminate it there. And then you can go to a medical provider and treat. and treat that. But a lot of it's just about how are you interacting in an environment? Because I'm sure you've all had a design where you've done something and then people were doing something you didn't expect them to do in the space. This really seems common sense and easy to design to fit the worker, but you know, every human is different, right? And therefore has different needs. So designing a space for one person is one thing. Designing a space for 3,000 people, or I can't even imagine a hotel, like an infinite range of everybody could come in, right? So this is why a lot of us in ergonomics tend again back to this flexibility. And I don't know how many people use sit-stand desk. I'm at one right now. When they started coming, oh, you do? Yeah. So I started working them in 1999, and it was great for sit-stand. But as an ergonomist, the reason I love them is I can fit more people to them, right? Because you're going to work. Speaking of fit, your ideal place where you're going to like key is going to be elbow height, whether you're sitting or standing. You want to make sure, like if you're typing on a keyboard, that it's elbow height. But other things that you're doing are probably going to be elbow height too, unless they're really forceful. They might be a little bit lower, right? And so that work surface height for a person who's a 5'2", 5'3" female is much different. And think of these desks. They're made so that people can get their legs underneath it who are 6 foot, 6'1". So I have all these people who are, and mainly women, they're working with shoulders hunched. And it's because we couldn't adjust it to fit their needs because they were going off of another body dimension. Some people ask about human factors and how that's different from ergonomics. It's not, it's basically the same thing. A lot of times human factors, people will say that's more the cognitive side of ergonomics, and ergonomics is more of the physical side. The criteria we use to evaluate and design: what are the hazards of the work? What is going to be the quality of life for the person in the space or the product or the work instruction? And what does their performance need to look like, right? And this is just all the areas that we get in, but today I'm talking more about workplace layout and design and postures. I don't think this is a secret. There's a direct correlation of how you feel and how well you perform. And so maybe at times you yourself have felt tired working at the end of the day, very fatigued. Maybe you've had discomfort. Maybe if you're standing a lot, it's in your feet, on your arm. And so we have to ask ourselves, does design create a hurdle for the person in the space, or does it take one away? So discomfort, stress, fatigue, these are some of the things people deal with. This is back to computer workers. We know that a lot of people who work on a computer are in significant discomfort, so a lot of problems with the neck, the back, the arms. But we also hear complaint about eye discomfort from improper lighting conditions. And this has been huge, probably the last 2 years, especially with the trend of white, high gloss tops. And as much as I've liked Fitwel and Well and all the natural lighting, we also have LED lights. We have all these things too, and people are being really having a lot of light exposure. And so we're having a huge spike of people with light-induced headaches. And now we have also a lot of open areas where people are expected to work. Again, this is more on the computers, but we have complaints about people straining to hear the person on the phone because they're in an open environment, poor acoustics. Janet next to me is sipping her coffee too loud. So-and-so's clicking their pen. There's a lot of distractions, so people can't focus. So a lot of things like this we've been dealing with on how to give people privacy to do what they need to do. This is really for you to interpret, because you know how you work and you know the value you bring. And now that I know how many different environments are here, a lot of times I'm working with people with commercial office space. And so that's a little bit different. But I'll try to have some other things here for you, but you can still apply a lot of these techniques. What I'm going to do is tell you how, again, I approach design, and then you can see if there's any synergy between the two, and how this might nicely meld with what you do. And just remember, the design goal is always human performance and preserving health. So how I start design is I understand how employees work, and I use that knowledge to help get a better space for them. So I usually start out with surveying employees to learn about how they're functioning. So I don't know, like if you're doing resident dining facilities, if you would survey some people who are interacting in the dining room and some of the workers who would do, but I would probably approach all the stakeholders there. Same for the senior living. What are the struggles you have during the day? What do you like about where you are, and make sure you can strengthen and keep things they like, but then maybe improve on some of these others. So, and also spend time in the field just observing, because there's always a perception between or reality and what people say. It's kind of in the middle, what really goes on. And I've found, I mean, I talked to a manager and I said, okay, tell me what the people do in this space. And he described it. I wrote it down. And do they do any heavy lifting? No. I was out there for 10 minutes and someone has a 50-pound thing of paper and they're walking by. It's like, oh, and he's like, oh, well, I only do this 4 times a day. Well, that's the highest risk part of your job, right? These are things you know, and people just forget, right? What is in their job tasks. So going and looking and asking questions always help. But it also gives you this nice baseline, right? So you can use this baseline to compare. When you resurvey after, you can say, hey, look, people are more satisfied in this space. So this is a question I asked. So let's say we're trying to decide between open office or privacy panels, and I'm interviewing people and they're like, okay, the majority of people are over 3 hours on the phone. Maybe even though we like the look of open office, how can we meet this kind of halfway, right? Because we know people are going to be on the phone a lot, and it's going to create a lot of distraction and noise, and they need that privacy. So when I survey, I can say, okay, they've got a lighting problem. So let me see what this is and see how the design can hopefully solve that. This is about just knowing what equipment discomfort people have. So again, I do that. I survey people, find out what's going on, and then about 4 to 6 weeks after, I do another survey. And the reason I do that is I want to, if something's not right, then I get a chance to fix it, right? And so for instance, in the very beginning, I showed you the gentleman who was twisting. When I took something from him, his job was twist, put something in, put the cup in the box, and then he did like a twist and then close the box. So what I did is I sped up his pace, because now he's not twisting, he's reaching and doing it. And so maybe by solving one problem, I created another, right? And so it's very important for me to revisit. Like if I tweaked how you're working, how is everything else going now? And so we have something called unintended consequences. So maybe in a place for seniors, you put in a lot of windows because they want to see outdoors more, but yet the temperature in the room is off, right? And now they're more cold. So there's an unintended consequence right? And now no one wants to be in there because they're freezing, because they get colder faster than someone a little bit younger. So these are things that we find out by asking and revisiting. And this is just what a baseline looks like for before. Also, in terms of spaces, and this is again towards a lot of the places where a lot of people are working at workstations. I always like to ask about where and how people are working now, because if you survey and ask and you start interpreting the results, what if they're only working in that space an hour, right? Maybe they're working from home most of the time, or the cafeteria, or all these things. So you want to make sure you know how the people are actually moving around the environments now, because this is what we're I think did this shift a little bit? There we go. This is what we're dealing with now, is the nomad employee, the work from anywhere. And I mean, I just was working with someone who's working from their RV now. So really it is truly work from anywhere. The other thing we do is we focus on fit and capabilities. So that's the second way we approach design. So meet Matthew. Matthew is 6'5", okay? So you can see he's at a hotel here. He's a pilot, and the shower head comes to his shoulder, right? So for him to take a shower, he has to drop to a full-on squat. And I was talking to him like, well, could you take a bath? And he was laughing and saying, I like that you think that I could actually fit in one of these bathtubs, right? And as a pilot, he's always everywhere. You can also see, it's hard to see because of the angle, but that's him standing straight up in the bathroom on the airplane, because he can't, you know, he's got to like really squat down to get in front of the mirror. The good thing is he's not in these spaces very long, so it's an inconvenience. It kind of he's just used to it, right? And that's what happens sometimes when you're the outlier, which is a body dimension that's maybe too tall, or like my mom's 5'1". Well, she says she's 5'2", so we'll say she's 5'2", so she's happy. But her house is full of little stools to help her reach things. Except as she ages, it's not really that safe for her to be toting around these stools and standing on these stools. So people start to accept maybe the world just isn't designed for a person like me, right? So aside from designing, I mean, one of the things that we can do to really help people is give them a good fit to their workspace. So that's really what ergonomics is rooted for and fit. And so when designing, we usually design three ways. We either design for the average, we design for the extreme, or we design for adjustability. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So a lot of times people design for the 50th percentile, and it's kind of a misuse, because people think that if they're doing the 50th percentile, they're really going to fit a lot of people, and they don't. When you see that red line, you can see the bell curve, and this is for the dimensions of like height, right? When you do that line, you're only fitting that person. And a good way to think about it is shoes. What if I'm designing shoes and I said, I'm going to take all of our shoe sizes and I'm going to plot them. And then I'm going to take the one in the middle, and that's going to be the shoe size for all of us. How many people would that fit? I mean, well, I guess it depends on, you know, all of our shoe sizes, of course, but it's only going to fit the people who are right there. And usually in class, I take your shoe sizes and we do this, but since we're remote, we won't. But you would see that, okay, it would probably only fit 1 or 2 out of the 24, right? And so that's one of the reasons that it makes it hard to design on the 50th percentile. And there's no person, none of us have body dimensions. Usually, I think I'm trying to think of the different ones, but so maybe there's like, I have to look. Maybe there's 50 body dimensions, right? So none of us, like, so maybe my finger is like the 90th percentile, but my hand is the 50th, right? So none of us are going to be all the 50th percentile. And they have this picture of this person who has like the perfect 50th percentile, and he's kind of like a megamorph man, because he doesn't look like a regular human, because just no one has those type of dimensions. And the other thing is to design for extremes, and maybe you do this a lot with design. And so what you're doing is you're plotting all the heights of a sample of people. And this could be, again, this could be like if I'm doing reaches, it might be shoulder to tip of finger. It could be a lot of different. If I was designing pants, it might be waist. If I was doing bench seating, it might be the span of hips. So there's different standards you can look for to see different body dimensions. So I'm just going to talk about height right now. So one of the things we do here when we use this, like for doorways, we're going to design for the 95th percentile, right? Because it's not going to really affect the shortest person, but we want to make sure the taller people can get through the door. And when it comes to light switches, we want to make sure that the smaller people can reach the switch. And this is especially important and I don't think you all work with this, but if you were ever to design where emergency stop switch is, you want to make sure that a lot of people can reach it, right? And then you have this way, which is designing for adjustability. And the more you can make something adjustable, the better you can fit more people. So one example I have is my daughter wore a uniform, and inside the skirt there's a little elastic, and you can change. It has buttons, so you can cinch it. So if it were totally fitted, you could probably fit, let's say, 50% of the kids in her class. But having the elastic where you can change and button it, now maybe you can fit 90%. Maybe you never fit the 100%, right? Because there's always people on the out skirt that may have to have some kind of accommodation. But the more you can make something flexible, again, the sit-stand desk is a good example. Also, office chair. So the red, these are key body dimensions when you're looking for an office chair. So your foot to the back of your knee, that would help with, that's how you determine the height. And so that's why that adjusts. Your knee to the back of your buttocks, that's a dimension. Your elbow to your top of shoulder, that's a dimension, and that affects your armrest height. And so for a long time, chairs have had all these different things, things that would adjust to fit. So when height adjustable tables came out, really, it was almost just like, I mean, that's just fitting another key dimension, right? So instead of thinking them as a novelty, I think of them more as a fit. And this is just, if anyone ever wants to play around with this, I don't know. This is a tool I use. And so ways I use it, it's automated database of body dimensions. So you can go in and pick like a civilian, and then you can do the gender, and then you can pick something like stature, and you can see, you could do yourself, you could see like your body dimensions, like where you fall, like 50th percentile or how you are. For me, how I use it, let's say I'm trying to determine reach. I want to make sure I know the person with the longest reach can reach something, but what about the shortest reach? So I want to maybe design there. Or if I was doing bench seating, the dimensions of humans have changed a lot, especially in width. So usually the 95th percentile male is the larger, but for bench seating, you would actually use 95th percentile female hip width, because they usually have wider hips than the males. But I would also look at the width of male shoulder, and I would probably compare the two. But those are just things you can you can do. We also have several tools to look at strength and load and grips. And so if you're designing a senior living facility, you might look at something and say, do they have the grip strength to actually turn that knob? Maybe I need to do a lever. Maybe I need to find a different way so that they can get in easier and they don't have problems with it. Oh, this has been my new project here. The watermelon cutter. Okay, so this is an odd story, but this is about product design. But again, my obsession, my friend Pam had this in a yard sale. And as soon as I looked at it, I knew the design's off because this is an apple cutter. And an apple cutter is pretty easy to use because you have it, again, it's hard to see my whole body on this. Your strength is greatest. A person's strength is greatest when they're like right about their hip. Their waist area, and then you put the force down, right? So if it's a 3-hole punch or anything like that, this is where you have force. Well, a kitchen counter is about 36 inches tall, and a watermelon with like long ways is about 16 inches. So for the watermelon, you're up here, you're out of the power zone, and that's a lot of force to take through a watermelon, right? So the whole design so it's a mix of how the tool is used, the person using the tool, but the environment they're using it. So that tool may not be a bad tool if it was not being used in the kitchen. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but this is how it ended up in Pam's yard sale because she's 5'3" tall, 66 years old. And the thing is, she could strain herself using it, or she might not be able to use it at all. And so you look at strength of the person. So it's not just about like their body dimensions, but what are people capable of doing strength wise with something? So it could be fixtures you use, however they are. Is the person you're using, can they do that? And keep in mind, anthropometric data is very limited when considering physical disability. And 26% of the adults in the United States have some sort of disability. So knowing your audience, so that could be visual, that could be a lot of different things. Definitely Sydney and the, for people who are 65 and older, you're dealing with probably a lot of range of motion, a lot of physical strength, a lot of limitations, but also a lot of visual, hearing, a lot of different things. I've always wanted to do one of those sensory rooms where they go in and they kind of alter your state to be like an 85-year-old, and you can kind of perceive how they perceive.
Except those who've had the cataract surgery, they can see a lot better than most of us.
Really, that's what my dad said. He's 88, and he said, I almost wish I wouldn't have done it because now I know how things really are when I look in the mirror. So, and this is, I've been tracking obesity and weight statistics to apply to design for, I don't know, probably the early 2000s. This greatly impacts the loads of furnishings and equipment. When I was working with healthcare, we were having a lot of hospital beds break, dental chairs break because they're putting the load on the arms of the chair. So a lot of the fixtures you would have inside these areas, people are using armrests to kind of maneuver and get themselves up. And one thing you have to do, it's not as easy, the science, like sometimes I need help too, because let's say for a hospital bed, it's not enough to say, okay, this bed is rated, it can fit someone who's 6'5", and oh, we can do it. It can hold 450 pounds, because all of a sudden you have someone who's 300 pounds and they're breaking 350 the back of the bed, and that's because this is a 5'1" female who weighs 300 and all the load is on the back side of the bed, if that makes sense. But that affects a lot of your furnishings, is how large the population is. So this is just a recap. I just thinking about what tasks are going to be done in the environment, who will be doing the task, what are the natures, and even if it's a person living, they still have tasks and different things they're doing, even if it's just doing laundry or going up and down the steps, whatever it is. An environment where precision work is being performed, they're going to need a special focus on lighting. A hallway being used by seniors, they may need special lighting, right? Things like silverware goes in a top drawer because it has more frequency of use, and thus in a location where there's less bending and easier to access, that can be applied. So you have to think, is this something that's done once or is this done repetitively? And if it's done more times, I might have to design it in a different way. We can take a quick break if that's okay. Does anyone have any questions? Let's see.
Yes, we had a couple comments here that I'd like to share with you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Susan Lewis was talking about small children in terms of access to a neat toy on the wall, in addition to, you know, the 50th percentile.
Oh, yeah.
So children, especially now with COVID, I think a lot of these principles apply to the COVID environment. We just have to be much more creative about applying them with the distances between people not being side by side and hearing and panels and divisions. So hopefully you can address that a little bit more.
Let's see. The panels, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just, in terms of you're talking about masses of people working together, which now of course isn't happening. So,
oh yeah. Okay, I see too. Yeah, especially cleaning for yes.
So I know a lot of your principles that you're discussing can be applied in different ways, and we can take that from there. Yeah. But I just want to remind people that we as designers have to be extra creative in all of these areas to deal with our current work environments.
Right, and we can during this break too, if at any point if people want to send in pictures for the end, I'd be glad to look at pictures of design, or if you have problems maybe with human stuff, I would be glad to address those too. I think we'll have time, since this is usually a little bit more hands-on and I've taken that part out. Okay.
I think also makes a big difference is on cabinets. I mean, you know, we have a typical way they're hinging and opening, but one of my clients, the dishwasher is like back here and the dishes are going to go here, and I had them put the hinge on the other side. I would have liked to have had it do more than 90 degrees to go back out of the way, but it's opening what would be counterintuitively not how it's laid out normally. So she could open it and not have to go around the door to get the dishes in. But it's what, you know, if you go into a kitchen and it's already there, they're just where they are, and they're not always useful that way.
That goes back to the twisting too, that Anne was saying, you know, forget about factory. You can apply that to residential on so many levels.
Yes, that's what I want to talk to you about too when we come back. I'm going to go grab something. I remember I was going to show you about this, but you just said it. It's something to do with the dishwasher.
Well, and I hope there's not. The thing is, you can't put the dishes right over the dishwasher because the door of the dishwasher is in the way.
Right. Yeah, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we went over fit. And we went over trying to get to know the people who are going to be in the space, and maybe broadening that outside of just the typical person, like let's say again the hotel, instead of just the guest who's staying there. Who else is in that space, like housekeeping? And now we're going to talk about reducing risk factors and meeting human needs. And this is really the bulk of this presentation. So these are some of the main risk factors and how we classify them. Today we're going to focus on the ones with arrows. I'll start with the physical ones, and then we'll get more into the environmental ones. And again, some of these are just around a lot of the workstation, but you can apply the principles, especially the ones on posture, to any type of thing. And that's what I do. I go in and I work with housekeeping. I work with people in bottling plants, material handling, different, and it's looking at the same risk factors. And just applying the techniques in a little bit different way. There's a personal psychology tool we often reference, and maybe you all know it. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this pyramid illustrates the needs that human beings seek to fulfill to be happy. And so it's said that a person can't reach the next highest level till they fulfill the bottom one that they're on. So in order to go on to the next level, you want to get that base level. And so today we'll also talk about things like clean air, natural lighting and movement, especially since those are covered in the Fitwel standards. Oh, and I just raised this. I'd lowered it so you all could see my body a little bit better, and then I raised it so I could see. So when we look at posture, there's three things we most often focus on. Neutral posture, which is what we want, and then awkward posture and static posture. So when you saw the person twisting, that was an awkward posture. So anytime you're bending, you're twisting, side bend, neck twist, extension, flexion, you're outside of the neutral posture. So you can't see my whole body, which I wish you could. Maybe I can show you better on, there we go. You can see his body and you can kind of see mine. If you put your arms, you can see this is really the neutral posture. And the neutral posture is basically when your body's relaxed, body parts and everything, you're looking straight forward. There's no twists or bends. And your arms are like this. If you do this, you can feel, like when I go like this, there's a rotation. When I go like this, there's a rotation. So even when you're keying on the keyboard, you're in a little bit of an awkward posture, right? Because you're in pronation. And so what I try to do is keep people in the neutral posture as much as possible. So when I go in, I look at their posture. Do they have their neck back or too much forward? Because anytime you do this, it puts stress on the body. Also, I don't know if you can see, but you have this natural curvature to the spine. We call it the S curve in your back. We're always wanting to protect that because when you're out of the S curve, there's more compression on the spine. And as we get older, that compression can lead to problems in the back. So when we sit, a lot of times our spines kind of round out in the back, the C shape. That's why we look for seating that has some lumbar support, especially if you're going to be sitting there for a long time. So in terms of, if you don't work with this, maybe this is just applied to yourself in terms of working on the computer. We want people to be able to sit back supported in their chair when they're sitting. We want their feet to be flat on the floor or on a footrest. And then especially if you're doing residential and working with people who are trying to set up space, if they have fixed furnishings, you can work with that. If their feet are dangling, I'm working with a lot of women who are trying to work from dining room table spaces and their feet are kind of like this, they're dangling. And what I try to do is to put, even a shoebox, anything to get their feet up. And they're always like, oh my gosh, this made such a huge difference. I can't believe it. And you don't have to, even if the surface of the table is too high for them, they can use a lap tray, or there's some tricks that I'll show you that you can do to make spaces work. If you're using a computer, you want to make sure that the monitor is about eye level. A lot of people are working on them too low. And what happens is, I don't know if you can see, you have a little bit of flexion, and even a little bit can put some strain, right? And then if I go back, there's a lot of vascular nerves running through the back of the neck. So even when you're doing signs for people, and I'll show you an example of how someone mounted a TV in a residence, you want to make sure that people can look straight on at things as much as possible, and not maybe force their positioning into one of these awkward postures. Keen height, and this is for most everything that you're going to do. I mean, precision work, you're going to want, if they're doing something that's a little bit, you want it a little bit higher up so that they can see it, but mostly it's always going to be at elbow height, right? And you want to make sure, and you can do this with me, just have your arms relaxed at your side, because that's what you want most of the time. You want to relax, just shrug them up just about an inch. And you can feel that tension in your body, right? And that's being in an awkward posture. And so we want people to be more relaxed, because the more tension you have in your body, and you can have tension from stress, you can have tension from the way your body's positioned, all these different things. And so what we want to do is try to take as much of that out as possible. The further away you are from the center point of your body, the weaker you are. And so reverse that. You'll be stronger, more balanced the closer your arms are to your core. So whatever you're doing, if you're carrying something heavy, you want it close to you, right? If you're moving something. And if you're picking something up, oh, here's this little thing. This is, had this little, it's probably hard to see. Where's this thing? You want to, if you're trying to pick something up, try not to do it from the floor. Try to do it waist level and keep it there so you don't hurt yourself. I see this all the time at the grocery store. People are putting their heaviest stuff on the bottom of the cart. And I think, why would you do that? That's the worst place to put it, right? They're in an awkward position. They've got the load, they're putting it there, and then they're getting it there. Heaviest stuff should actually be at waist level, and lighter things should be at the bottom. I don't always practice that myself, by the way. Like, it just seems really weird to have your yogurt on the bottom cart. So this shows you, I mean, this is about staring at a smartphone, but this is the weight on the spine. So just like, you can see how when you're balanced, the weight of your head, which is actually quite heavy, it doesn't have as much weight. But as soon as you start doing, like going forward, the weight of your head increases on your spine. So this kind of shows you. So once you get out your 12-pound head 60 degrees off, then it's like a 60-pound head. That's the way your spine interprets it. So this is an awkward posture, which is so uncomfortable, right? Changing the, and you can see that. But there's a lot less obvious. So this is a residential space, and this trend of having the TVs up above, and even I see this in a lot of hotel common areas, and I think, well, it makes sense because maybe people are walking in front of it, but everybody's sitting around like this, right? And that's one of the worst positions to be in with neck extension, because it's a lot of strain on the body. So it's almost like you want to make sure, I mean, it's kind of hard, I guess, because that fireplace is that center part, right? That focal point, and you're putting that TV there, but it's a lot of, oops, there's somebody. So you can see this is really quite common, this awkward posture for computer users. You will never be able to use a laptop in a good position for your body, right? Unless you use something to help you. And that's because your keying height is elbow and your viewing height is here. I mean, this is a huge window, right? And the laptop is only like this. So you'll either have your shoulders up or you'll have your head down. And one way that we treat that as ergonomists is we separate the two, or we use a riser. So you can see we used a riser that goes on the back, and so you can lift that up. And I usually use an external keyboard. So that's what I'm doing for a lot of the people who are working at home. I mean, they can use, probably as designers, you don't like a shoebox on top of a table. I mean, you can find better looking things, right? But you can use something to lift it up and just get an external keyboard, and it's an easy fix. These are other poor postures, leaning forward. We're having a lot of problems with the depth of dining room table chairs for people who are trying to work at home in the space right now. And so we're adding cushions behind them, anything we can do, a lot of dangling feet. This is, again, the neutral posture. So you see awkward posture, neutral posture. And a lot of times you'll read and it'll say, well, keep your ears above your shoulders. Well, that's a little deceptive because his ears are above his shoulder in all these positions, right? It's just real simple. Just make sure you can see things looking forward. If you have a menu at a place, you don't always want to be looking like this. It's easier, but you got to see over a person, I understand. So the more you can make something more eye level, the better that it is. These are just the main culprits of discomfort from workstations. And a lot of it just are little tweaks, different things that you can do. So discomfort, no matter where you are, this is some of what it looks like. Soreness, neck, lower back, headaches. A lot of times, and I've gone into a couple of home assessments. This was before COVID. Now they're all virtual right now, but I'll go in to help with people's environment, and they'll be having all this back pain, and it's actually from lighting, because sometimes that can manifest right in the neck and the back, the tension from the eye strain. And I wanted to show you some practical things, maybe just for your for your own life before we go on, just in terms of ergonomics. This from your dishwasher, right? A lot of times, and I do this sometimes myself, and I'll see people doing it, they unload, they reach and get the fork, they put them in the thing, and they're doing this repetitively, right, to do it. This was made to come out. So, and a lot of people, they don't actually take the time to take it out because it is cumbersome, but you just if you set it in front of the drawer, then see how you're like this? That prevents the awkward posture. And so there's little things in design everywhere that are meant to help us stay out of awkward posture, and sometimes we don't even use them. Let's see. And this is just more to help we have a lot of mousing injuries, and a lot of it's because people mouse, like they had the deviation in the wrist, and really to mouse, you want to use your whole straight arm. This is just a tip for you all, more so than for your design. So you just try to keep your wrist straight. And a lot of times people will have these vertical mice, and that's because it fits more of the neutral posture, right? Because you're already. This is a huge principle in ergonomics and design for us, and it's reach. And I think this is probably in every environment, especially manufacturing. It's you want to, here we go, keep the things you use the most, the closest to your body. And I've got my elbows to my side and I'm windshield wiping, right? This is where whatever I'm doing, I want to have this is my space to work, because my elbow, what happens when it's up? See how my arms go forward? It's tension. See if my arms go out, like using the mouse, if it's too far out, then that's abduction of the arm. So we're always trying to keep things here. Then we have this next zone, which is things we use sometimes. We might use them a little bit more, like a calculator. And then we have this far extending reach. And so whenever you're designing things, you want to try to keep out of the extended reach area. So let's see, sorry. I'm coming back up because, oops. Okay, so when you're doing storage for places, I don't know how you all deal with like overhead storage and different things, but this is something that we have that we deal a lot with in places, is people trying to get to places where there's storage. So a lot of twisting, a lot of reaching, and it's just making sure heavier items are not stored. Like in a lot of times in offices, it's like, okay, here's our, you don't have encyclopedias anymore, but here's our big binders, like way up here, right? Like, can we get those like waist height and put other things that are lighter up there? So just making sure that the storage that you do has things in a better reach zone. So here's some of the Frankenstein stuff I'm talking about, like when things aren't flexible. This lady's working at home, so she's got books underneath, and is that Girl Scout cookie box? I'm not for sure, but she's raised up her laptop. She's actually in a pretty good position, right? It works, but you probably don't like it for your design. And then I got Mark here to the left, and he's got arms extended out. You can see the extension in his neck. He's got glare from the windows. The desk height is too high, and his is adjustable. So sometimes it's behavior, right? Sometimes we can give people stuff, but we have to influence them to use it. This is my little gal here at home working, and you can see how she was working before, which, like, just please stay like this for a little bit. And so I've got a yoga block underneath her, and I've used a lap tray. That way it's a better position for her. So this is another home setup. I know I just showed you her, but I just want to emphasize, I prefer these setups physically to what I'm going to show you now, which is this. So when I was doing this book on work from anywhere, I'm going through all these residential workstation designs, and I'm thinking, oh my God, none of these are great for working more than at least an hour on. So now that you know your ideal is keen height is at your elbow, you also have to have leg clearance. So if you look at the space between the top of your leg sitting and your elbow, you're talking, what, an inch, maybe 2 inches? So what happens when you have a real thick surface like this? You're either going to have your arms up or you can't get your legs underneath. And when you can't get your legs underneath, you're sitting too far back. So now you have a reach problem. You see how these things kind of do it? So you really want to make sure with any kind of work surfaces, and I mean, this could be dining room table, this could be a lot of things. It just depends on the duration of time someone's going to be there, but the thickness of it. And this one, which when I looked at it, I'm like, it is super cute. However, there's no space for your legs because there's a shelf, and then you've got those drawers. So if you rest your feet on the shelf, the drawer, you can't get into that. So could you use this as a standing workstation? Yeah, possibly, because there's space for the feet underneath. So maybe you can still use this. Maybe you have to find something to set it on top to get it at the right height for standing. But I definitely wouldn't pair something like this with chairs. In terms of any kind of surface that you're doing, there's the contact stress we talked about before, where you have, this can be, I mean, a lot of times you have it with a part of the arm, like hitting against a sharp surface. So anytime there's a sharp surface, and this can even be for footrest, like you want it to make sure things are padded or rounded whenever they're coming in contact with the skin. So a lot of desks are this bull nose, which I think is good, but or the demi bull nose, but the full bull nose, see, a lot of men still have trouble getting their legs underneath it if it's fixed. And so that sharp edge of the underside of the desk, even if it's a dining table or something else, can go into the top of people's thighs. And if you think about people who are bigger, if you have a population of people who are like bariatric, heavier, they have more tissue, right? So it's also, regardless of their height, like getting underneath the table, they may have some tissue going into it. So as much as rounded as you can make surfaces, the easier it is on the body for when they're sitting in them. So to truly know if it's risk, because sometimes I'll look at like a space, again, like this work at home space, and there's no room for legs. Well, if they're never hardly using it, it's not really a big deal. But if they're using it for 8 hours, 5 days a week, it is a big deal, right? So we're always looking, we're trying to balance all these things together. And we're also looking at force. Is the person doing something while they're carrying a load? Me having my arms out like this, okay, that's one thing. It's a little bit of stress, but if I'm handling something that has a 5-pound weight, then that's something else. And when it comes to loads, even if you're just bending over, you're still carrying, you still have a load whether you're carrying anything or not, because you're supporting your own body weight. So the heavier you are, the more load your body feels when you're bending over and picking something up or just doing something. Oh goodness, this guy. So you can see, this is just showing you reach, like see how far his mouse is back from where he is, and he's twisting to see the monitor. He's got his arms up. Again, the desk is too high. So this is what's kind of typical for us when we go in. We can just, we want people, if you're in front of something that you're working with, this can be anything. It doesn't have to be a workstation, but you want to be directly in front of whatever you're working at. So when you design a space where someone's going to work and they're working here, you want to make sure whatever they're looking at, whether it's a screen or whatever it is directly in front of them, so you don't create twist. And this is a tool that I use, which is rapid upper limb assessment. And I just put this in here because I thought it would be interesting for you to see, because the higher the numbers are, the more risk is involved. And so what this does is it weights the position of the body in different areas with the duration and repetition and also the load. And I don't expect anyone to use this, but you can just see, right? The more extension I have or bending or anything, the higher the number. And then that's going to get you into these higher levels down here. So I already know, see what neck extension is? It's a 4. That's a really high number on this list. So when you create a thing where people are looking at a TV and they're in neck extension, it's a high stress on the body. So maybe you all can do this guy, if you can tell me just what's wrong with his setup. Anybody? Oh, you're all muted, I guess. Maybe I'll do it for you. Well, he's got white socks on with black shoes. I was just saying, this is usually, I have people in the class, I'll give them pictures of postures and they can say what's wrong with it. I only kept one in since we're virtual.
There's Jan Lepton said the screen should be elevated.
Definitely.
Julie Manning said that the feet are not flat on the floor.
Yes.
Lewis said the monitor isn't at face level.
Yes.
And Michael said he should move his seat lower.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Susan says the feet are not flat, the back curved.
Yeah, that's it. And there's a little bit of contact stress. You can see how he's got his thighs kind of mushed up into the tabletop. So
right. Head bent, knees, legs against the tabletop from a net. Yeah, his knees.
Yes. Yep. That's Dan.
Gary likes his white socks.
Yes. Well, he's a good sport for being a volunteer for me to do this. Yeah. And sometimes you can go in as long as you have people. He has all the right equipment there, right? All we have to do is do some adjustments for it, and that's the beauty of speccing things that have some flexibility to them. Even if it's a pin system and you can drop it down for someone. One of the best systems I found. Oh, I should have put a picture in this for homework is these they're metal strips that go up the wall, and you can just take the shelf, right? So it's adjustable all the way up. And so for someone who has kids, right, like me, I have an 11-year-old who you saw in the picture. I can have her here, and then maybe in another year she's here, and I can always get a pretty good range right within her. So the one thing I will say about posture is, even though I showed you what the neutral posture is, it doesn't matter if you are in the best neutral posture. Any position that you stay in too long is going to generate fatigue. And that's our other posture we want to avoid, is static fatigue. When you have someone either sitting or standing in one place for too long. And how long is too long? Generally an hour, but depending on the person's health, it could be much shorter. I've gone to wellness fairs and people have trouble standing for 10 minutes or 15 minutes straight. So it really depends on the person. Are they a senior? Are they heavy? What's the condition of their knees? So a lot of people ask, well, how do I know that I've been sitting too long? Actually, your body naturally knows when it's time. I think we've all been, maybe even today, like you're sitting here, right? And you start to get that antsy feeling, you start shifting around in your chair, but that doesn't really solve that problem. The only thing that does is when you get up and you walk around and you move a little, right? Because it's your body's telling you, I need circulation, I need to move. And a lot of times we override it. So when we can build into any kind of environment the ability for people to alter positions, it gives the other body part time to rest. So for instance, a manufacturing position, when I have someone who is working on concrete, standing for 10 hours a day, and he's not moving a lot, if I can give him a stool, he can maybe sit back a little bit, right? Like a standing stool or something, and take a little bit of load off, and that will help, because there's a lot of blood pooling in the legs and a lot of stress on the body from static, much more than people probably realize. When you're in the awkward posture and you're static, that's a lot of load on the body, right? That's a lot of fatigue. And if you think, like a good example is driving in a car. If you've ever gone on a road trip and it's, let's say, a 6-hour road trip or 8-hour road trip, and you're so tired by the time you get there and all you did was sit, it's because you were sitting in a static posture this whole time, and you probably didn't stop as much as you needed to because you just want to get there. Or if you did stop, you went in and sat down again to eat, right? Another static sedentary posture. And so, and then you might be gripping the steering wheel, you may have mental stress from the traffic. So all these fatigue, it just kind of works together. When you sit, your calorie burning slows. People with sedentary jobs are twice as likely to die from heart disease. So I won't get into all the different studies on this, but there's so many now. Oh, did this shift a little bit? But it just is important for people to know, and I'll talk about movement in at the end. Even if you do 30 minutes of running or strength training or yoga, it doesn't offset a sedentary lifestyle, right? That still has consequences on our body. So we do need to move around a little bit. What I usually recommend are that people take like these little micro breaks, and these are good for you mentally, also physically, right? So maybe a 2 to 5 minute break every 45 to 60 minutes. Let's see. just as far as posture. If you can mix sitting and standing, I don't know, as designers, I would think you're all probably not as bound to your computer as other professions, so you probably get a good mix. But just to be aware that a lot of people are either, if they're working food service, they may be standing all the time, so they may need a place to sit for if you're doing a break area for them. And if someone is sitting all the time, the break area may need to be a place to stand or to move around a little bit. So it's just keeping that awareness. So I'm going to just talk a little bit of the standards. It seemed like not a lot of you all are working with big office groups on the, but does anyone work with the BIFMA standards or any of these type of things?
We're aware of them, and some of us too, I'm sure.
Okay, well, I'll go over them, and then you'll have them too. I can send them to anyone who wants them, just for notes. But it's just to know that a standard is, I mean, it's a good collaboration from people, and it's a good place to start. But you also want to keep in mind, just like we talked about the ADA, you still want to keep in mind and use your own judgment when using them on how that applies. So if you're working in a space like in California, one area I was working with, the women were much smaller because they were mostly Asian, right? So their body dimensions were different. So the standard for me, I really needed to try to go below that 5th percentile female, right, in terms of height and body dimensions, because I had a different population to fit. So it's I'll show you some of the standards, but then try to use that. And then this is just OSHA. It's just basically saying that employers should take care of people in terms of health and in their spaces. So these are recommendations from me that I've gotten from reading and reviewing all the standards. So if you don't want to look through all of them, you can do this. I think one thing about surfaces, I would say we deal with a lot of surfaces that are reflective. I've put a lot of felt down on top of glass surfaces for people. Metal surfaces, they get kind of cold, but also again, the way the lighting works with these surfaces, if someone is working all day at the surface, especially the light, it can have a lot of glare, like a lot of reflective glare. And so I try to find things that aren't reflective. If I'm looking for adjustability, which most of the time I do, I want to do it 22 inches to the 40, right about 47. If I have a client that's taller, of course, I may want something a little bit different. We talked about sharp edges, and we talked about clearance. Well, I don't know if we talked about clearance under the desk as much. Getting into that reach, this reach zone, which is like elbows through, you really want to make sure that you can get close up to the surface that you're working at. And I know for kitchens, you've got that space for your feet underneath. I think it's about 4 inches. So you want that, if any place someone's going to stand to work, you want that underneath too, so people can get up close, and especially if you're trying to design your own standing workstation. In terms of safety, I've seen a lot of people put in these, they'll buy the electric adjustable ones, and which that's what I have right now. But you want to make sure that these surfaces, whatever it is, that there's space between. Because what happens if I'm moving it and my fingers get caught? You can smash a finger, sever a finger, but you can also, I have a doorknob that's all jammed up like this because I didn't see, when I was doing the clearances around it, I didn't think, okay, the door open, when the door is fully open like this, and then someone raises the desk, it catches the doorknob, right? So you want to look at clearance, and that could be from side cabinets coming in. So you just definitely want to make sure you don't create a safety hazard when you're trying to help people. And then a lot of these, especially the more expensive desks, one of the features they have is where the desk will move on its own. And that is really a safety issue. I would not recommend that. We call it unattended moving, because what happens, you have to be able to get to an emergency stop or be able to stop something in case, let's say, a child's underneath it. Especially in the home environment, you have a lot of different things going on. The anti-collision, a lot of the commercial desks have it. So if the desk is moving and it does collide, it will just automatically retract up. It's a safety feature. So if you can ever get that, then I recommend that. So this is a checklist for human factored centered workstation design. And I mean, you could apply this to other things too. Do you have a place for people to lock and keep their personal items while they're there, right? Is there a place for someone to have a little bit of privacy? Definitely cable management is a huge issue in a lot of places, especially places that people come in for, I guess you would call it hoteling, where they're just coming in, even maybe educational places where people are just going to come in with laptops and then leave, but you'll see cords stretched to the wall to another table. That's an opportunity for someone to get injured. So we just want to make sure we have some of that thought out in the plan. I don't know, not a lot of people have temperature control on their own desk yet, but I sit on a heating pad here in my office. It's kind of helped. It's a special one, but it's one of the infrared ones. But those are things that I've done to try to help people who have issues with that. So this is just about the posture to get in. And I've put the different things. This is from a Canadian standards. I won't go through them, but you can have them if you want them. Maybe, I don't know, do you all use the Fitwel or the Well in what you're doing? What I've tried to do on things that we're talking about is put where you can get points for this. And so I'm not going to tell you about it since you know it, but I will say you can get points for providing access to active workstations like sit-stand adjustable workstations. And again, you know, I'm a fan because of the fit. Also the sit and stand to get people out of static. So this is what you could do to get
That one looks like it, that dust didn't look like it had any space between where it would rise and go down.
Let's see, let me look at this. This does have space. Yes, this is actually, but they actually have sit stand that fit into panel systems now. So the legs actually click into it, and they do have a space on the back. And this is, I think this, you see this little black thing right here? Like this whole section, oh, you can't see, that's my hands. The whole L part of that workstation moves up, but there's a space on the back. And you can see the bracket along the leg where it kind of attaches so that if somebody pushes on that panel, it doesn't change the space. Does that make sense? Yeah. Well, you can, I prefer option A, where 60% of the workstations are adjustable height standing. You know, that just depends on your client's budgets and needs and all these things. There's ways to work around that. The one thing I will say is when you get, this has something about the desktop height stands. I'm sure you've seen the units that go on top of a desk instead of the whole work surface going up. Those can work. You just have to make sure you use them in the right way because they can also cause problems. Someone whose legs are too big and can't fit underneath the desk, right? Getting them up to stand, that might be helpful, but then they may have trouble sitting at the desk still. Someone whose the desk height is already too high, when you put that on it, you actually raise the height even more. So they're good standing, but they can't maybe sit still, right? So if you get one, make sure it maybe drops down in the front so that it can go below desk height and above desk height. I don't know if that makes sense. And this is just talking about what we talked about, that 4 inches of space under the desk if you're doing a standing desk so that people have room for their feet. For maybe some of us women, it's not that big of a deal, but if you're Matthew and your foot is like this big, like you need some space so you can get close to the surface. These are the ANSI standards. And I'm not going to go through. We talked about the pinch points and adjustable surfaces, but you'll have them. This is about BIFMA and what they have. But what you will need to know, is that sometimes will want to make sure that you, I don't know if it's on here or not, it may be on the other one. It'll want to know that you meet the BIFMA or the ANSI. And that's why I put it in, right? Because then you can have it. And if it's ever for a client and you're wanting to know if it meets it, then you can go back and look and see what those are. This was just someone that you can see them working at their desk. It's a video on how to use a sit stand, which I think is kind of obvious on how to do. When you're looking for a chair, this is probably, people ask me about the chair all the time. You just really, the more you can make a chair, no matter where it is, adjustable for people to get in and out and have different sizes available. We had one chair we called the jockey chair at our office for people who were under 5 foot. And we actually had an actual jockey working there, which is why we called it that. But after he left, it would kind of make its way around. And then we had some larger sized chairs. And it was just helpful for us to finally tag those chairs so that we know, because what would happen is they would get mixed in the general population of chairs and people couldn't figure out like why their chair was either too big or too small. So keeping track of which chairs are different sizes. I guess you know probably more about breathable fabric than I do. But just making sure that the seats are wide enough to accommodate. The seat pans, the majority of users don't adjust all the adjustments on their chair. And so some of the things that you can do is to make sure you have these adjustments, but also make sure you give people support on how to adjust the seat pan and some of these different things. So this, on terms of this talks about meeting the BIFMA and the ANSI guidelines for credit for this. And so I've just put them here. So if you ever have a question, you can see if you're speccing those type of chairs, if they meet that. I don't think you will, the monitor arms, since you're all not doing as much office, it's just being able to tilt is a big deal, because a lot of people have a lot of, again, lighting issues. Lighting issues seem to be a problem in a lot of different spaces. And so whenever you have a computer, making sure that you can tilt it is important. I even see that on TVs installed residentially. Like when the screen is totally black, you can see if there's reflective glare and already glare issues before you even turn it on. So if you can tilt, sometimes if you just tilt it a little bit, you can angle that out. So this is just making sure things are adjustable. Even if something isn't adjustable, sometimes, especially monitors, you can put a riser underneath it or change it. You just want to make sure, because a huge problem, again, is when people get something, they put it too high and then they have neck extension. And so the best workstation design always goes back to how are people working in the space and what do they actually need to do their job. lighting. Oh boy. Okay, so usually I have this window open while I'm working in here, but I turned, the reason I did it is because your experience seeing me would be different with that light behind it. Your eye is always drawn to the brightest thing in the room, right? If you ever looked at a picture and there's like a bright spot of a light and you're like, I wish I could get that out, or that's there. And so I also have a sunlight in here that sometimes is a little bit of a problem. But when you position furnishings, especially for people to work, you want to make sure that you're perpendicular to a natural light source. And you'll still deal with glare, but glare is one issue we deal with quite a bit. So it can be too bright, too dark. Getting it just right is not always easy. This was at this is just an example where you can see how bright it is, right, on the left. But the right is an actual picture from an insurance company I was working with in Texas. And they got these new LED lights. And it was great because they decreased electrical consumption by up to 50%. Unfortunately, this unintended consequence is the migraines that swept throughout, right? And so we had employees who are climbing desks with printer paper, and they were taping it to try to create their own diffusers because the lights were so bright. So imagine walking into your home environment and none of your lamps have shades, right? And they're all that bright, high bright. Well, it's a lot to the sensory. So you really have to keep all this in mind. Okay, yeah, we're doing LED lights, but can we put a dimmer on the LED lights? That way the employees can maybe dim them if they're too much. And that's something big because I think when I was working with this group, they described this space as it can best be described with a scream face emoji, right? Like, because you're just like your sensory. So any kind of task lighting that you can have, can you see this? Where you can illuminate the task can help with people lighting. So you don't have to have it so bright. And you want to watch the colors, reflective surfaces, the white walls, like all this stuff. It can cause a bit of a problem. I'm not even going to try to show video from here because that's always a mess when you're watching a presentation. But basically, she closes the window, he opens it back up, close, open, close, open, close, open. And this is what we see a lot in a lot of different spaces. Even in the home with your spouse, you turn it up to 72, they turn it down to 68. And so we have this a lot with lighting. And a lot of it's the positioning too of the desk and the space. Or even you could be at Panera and your experience is different because you're sitting at a window with sun coming in and you're asking someone, can you turn the blind or something, than someone else. And so one group I worked with, they had this great space and the two people by the window always were closing the blinds. And then everyone else in the room was mad because they want the natural light coming in. But the two people by the window were dealing with all the glare issues. And so really the only way to kind of make it work, you can't, okay, Misty, you changed with Jack, but now he's going to have that issue, right? It's changing the orientation in terms of where it is to the light. This is just how much light is needed for various. So for just regular visual tasks, it's going to be about 500 lux. And you can see reflectance of objects in this. So walls, furniture, a lot of things can reflect. Now I included this, I'm not going to go through all this, but I thought this is handy for an environmental analysis about lighting, and especially if you're working with office areas. Making sure reflective glare is minimized. And Will has something about glare avoidance on here. So you can see how it talks about perpendicular. I want to show you, let's see. well, I'll go back to it. I have a drawing where you can see how things can be set up in front of windows, which I think will make it a little bit more, but making sure how close things are to windows. And especially some windows don't even have blinds on them. So there's nothing that the people can do around them. So giving people who are by that space a lot, like some kind of flexibility. Let's see. Sorry. So the best overall approach to reduce glare, having lights like in the insurance company, we went in and put diffusers on it. And then again, made it adjustable. Again, watching the position of desk and tables and other spaces around that. And then the overhead lighting, you don't want it directly over a person. You want it back. So it's really hard to kind of get all the different lighting right in some of these areas. And these standards, they help, but they want you to have a lot more natural light in, and that doesn't always work for the human. They want the natural light, but it's got to be a good mix of how it's incorporated, if that makes sense, where it works for them and not against them. In terms of desk lighting, you want to be able to turn it off. We've been in spaces where people have recommended things and people can't turn it off. Your lighting during the day changes, especially if you have a lot of access to natural light. On a darker day outside, you might want your task light more. On a brighter light, you might want to turn it off. So just being able to adjust it and have a shade over it and be able to turn it off is good. Okay, here's what I was talking about. So you can see how this is set up where people are, it's either coming behind the screen or they're looking into the light. That's not preferable. It's more over to the right where it's coming perpendicular, right, from the side. So that's what you want to look at when you have natural light, especially when people are using monitors. But it doesn't matter. You could be sitting eating. You don't want to stare into that contrasting light. You want to have it perpendicular. And so if we could just talk about maybe your experiences with lighting, if any of you all have best practices, it doesn't have to be from commercial workstation. It could be any type of environment. If anyone has anything to share on lighting.
I can say the best thing with lighting is make it flexible, just like you said with the furniture, making it flexible and having a combination of sources. And I do a tremendous amount of lighting design. And so that's building flexibility into your system is key.
Okay, that's good. Do seniors need more light, by the way?
They do, but they definitely need to be able to dim it. And we're working very much now on the circadian lighting system so that it reflects the times of day. So
okay, that's
I
good too.
always want to have on a diffuser on the bottom so you don't have just all the bright bulbs. There's so many fixtures out there that are just have it open, but I like diffusers. I think it helps get rid of glare.
Okay, that's good to know. Do you all, when you were all setting up spaces and tables, do you all you normally do them perpendicular to the windows, or is that something that they teach in design school?
Yes, I do have a comment on lighting. A couple other people wanted to say the lighting temperature and the CRI from Jan Caton is critical, of course.
Oh, yes.
2700K and higher CRI for best light for dimmers. Cindy McClure says, I like specifying wall washers instead of down lights and always on a dimmer. Lighting the vertical plane is key, and not having it on your head, which Anne mentioned.
Okay, I'm making notes on that.
One lighting class I took, they said that if you light the middle of the room, it'll still stay dim. If you light the walls, it appears much brighter.
Right, that's what I was saying about lighting the vertical surfaces. It helps to expand the
I wrote that down. I've learned something. That's good. That's good for me. I always like when I can learn from you all with this kind of.
You have high degrees of contrast. That's a fatigue on the eyes as well, but you can highlight different areas for your task. It's just a balance of the intensity of it.
Right. No, I think that's good. And I do have a lot of information about the warm and hot. I'm just not very good at that, so I never try to explain it because I have a colleague I work with who is more of a lighting expert. Okay.
Color rendition is really important along with the temperature, especially with all these LED sources. They're like quicksand for us right now, all the
Oh,
glare.
really? Okay. So we have the same we're dealing with. Then maybe I need to call you all for the the lighting stuff. 'Cause I'm like, oh no, not lighting, not air quality. I need help on that. Um, well, the next thing, gosh, this is such a big hurdle. This is facing everyone. I mean, we've become so sedentary. Of course, I just sat down. I didn't realize inactivity was next. So the irony, but I've been standing the rest of this time. Um, a lot of sedentary lifestyles. And so that's one reason I actually got involved with Fitwel and my colleague with Well is because we've been working with a lot of corporate wellness and different things to try to get people active and um, break the sedentary behaviors. I mean, even besides the time they eat, people are kind of glued to the chair. A lot of them are eating lunch at their desk. Even if they have a nice cafeteria to go, they're just too busy. Um, I mean, sorry. One of the things we talked about being in the car, right? And how that can make you fatigued. Um, it's kind of this thing that snowballs. The more you sit, the more static muscle fatigue you have from sitting, the more tired you are, the least, you don't want to stand. So you sit more, but sitting more makes it worse, right? So it's like, and I have clients at the end of the day, I just want to go home and crash. And it's just because they've just been sitting, staring at a screen all day. And so we just try to find different ways because we've engineered a lot of movement out of the workday. So before when people were getting up to go fax or running across the street to eat with a friend or all the different things they used to move were so automated. I mean, now they're bringing Grubhub or whatever is bringing my sandwich to me, and I'm emailing. And even though Joe is like 4 desks away, I'm sending him an instant message. What happens is we start to shrink our footprint and our steps get less. And now that we have so many people working at home, I mean, you're talking people going, I have one client, 7,500 steps, and they're like, I'm struggling to get 2,000 steps. Why? Their footprint is smaller, right? And so what this just talks about how much people sit and how they do, and they don't get a lot of the recharge. So let's talk about what's sedentary. Sedentary is less than 5,000 steps a day. You kind of have to track your steps to have an awareness of what they are. I usually recommend people to try to fall in 7,500 to 10,000. I mean, it's not always possible, but you're looking at your average, right? That's what your body needs to stay active. And I have a presentation all on this, right? An hour on eating and how your body works and different things. But that's one of the things we're seeing with this rise in obesity is you can't eat the same and do this much, do less, right? You need to be somewhat active to be able to eat these base amount of calories. And there's so many different types of fatigue, mental, muscle. I mean, eye fatigue from staring at the screen, muscle overexertion. Getting up, walking around, it really helps you, right? It kind of rejuvenates you. And so getting people moving. And so what I really liked about these standards and why I even got involved with them in the beginning is that okay, well, these are staying at your desk and being active, but what about, a lot of them say, okay, have a door that goes out to a walkway and you can get points, like things like that, that make being active more accessible to people where they are. And so a lot of people, again, designing other places to sit within places to sit and sitting again. So look at these more active places where people want to come, maybe move around a little bit more. I know people are still sitting, but some people can stand, and there's a whole space here that's a little bit more active. Look how open that is to be able to go outdoors and be able to do. Maybe for our weather, it's not acceptable. Maybe this is like California, but there's still things like this that we can do to get people fresh air, to get people light, to get people moving a little bit more. In terms of stairwells, this is one of my favorites. Nobody likes the creepy stairwell in the corner. I went to the doctor yesterday and took the stairs, and it's like I'm always going as fast as I can because it's so dark and scary. It's like anytime you can do something that's light, that's open, that's inviting, it will get people to use this type of thing to be active instead of taking the elevator. So these are the things we look: active stairwell design, accessible glass where people can see it. It's not so enclosed. I showed you this picture before. A lot of break areas are set up for inactivity after people have been inactive. So having different things, sometimes people have pool tables in them. It takes a special client to be able to have a ping pong. I mean, we have one person I work with, they put in a ping pong table, and then they said people are playing too much ping pong, so they were going to remove it. You know, you got to find a way to make it work. But as long as it's in a break area or an area where they're invited, or the culture is open and trusting, where people can do that and still do their work, you can make it work. So this is just like a comment. This is this is at I was like, where did I take this picture? This is at the Midway Airport. They have a yoga room out to the side. So if you're traveling in Midway and you want a break, they have this little room off to the side, and you can go in. Hardly anyone's ever in there, and you can have a nice, quiet, serene space to do yoga or sit or whatever away from the hustle and bustle. But like spaces like this, I work with Exxon down in Texas, and when we went on one of their tours, they had a lot of meditation rooms, and I thought that was fascinating. So like having spaces for people to decompress or to be active or just do something other than sit and look at a screen are nice. Does anyone have any experiences they want to share in this realm? No? I know we're on mute, so I don't, and I can't see the questions.
Okay, I usually run the stairs in my house. This is Denise.
Oh, hi, Denise.
So I usually take breaks and just do the stairs from the basement to my second level, up and down, and that recharges me.
I'd like to thank Denise for also co-hosting this with me, the CEU committee. Denise, this is her virgin voyage into producing bringing a CEU to us. So she's been instrumental in helping to bring Anne to speak to us today. I want to thank Denise for helping the committee bring Anne to us.
You're welcome.
I do a lot like that too, Denise, because I work at home a lot. And so what I'll do about, I don't know, usually around 10 something, I'll just take a walk around the block and come back, just get outside, fresh air. And especially if I have a phone call to take, I put in my earbuds and I check in with people. So I'll walk up and down the driveway, which my neighbors think I'm the crazy person. So, but I'll just pace that. And I used to do that when I was in the work office too. I would go into a conference room and walk around.
Yeah, it's great, especially at 3 o'clock.
Yeah. One of the professors I was working with, they had these name badges, and what it said, it didn't have their name on it. It said meeting in progress. So the teams, they had the university had like a walking space. So the team would put on, it said meeting in progress. So maybe 3 of them they would have their meetings while they walked.
Oh, that's
And they always
cool.
felt like they had different, like, better ideas than just sitting looking at themselves in the conference, by just getting away from that space, breaking the monotony and going out. And I love that as an idea.
Yeah.
Some of these big campuses like Genentech have opportunities for people to do that.
As an event planner, not a designer, with all the different events that we have, we always try to include these active standing spaces. It creates a quicker bonding with the people you're with, because if you're sitting at a table, you tend to be very reserved and keep your things to yourself, where when you're outside, you can spread out and you feel more open, and there's less offensive body language. There's more sharing of ideas, whether it's, oh, isn't that a beautiful tree? I have this at home. So as an event planner, we build those right into our concept designs.
Yeah, I think that's good. Anytime you can keep people engaged, I think it's a good thing. Well,
So let's, so we
Did we
won't
want
take a
to
break.
take a break?
I don't think we should take a
no,
break.
we'll just power through. And at the very end of this is a barcode so that people can get the CEU credits that they asked me to put in, because they have a new app. So people can scan that in to get them, or they can submit their information. Will they submit that to you, Terry, and then to me, or?
No, they submit it directly to the IID.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. Is that correct, Sydney? Sydney, you're on mute.
Mute. I'm trying to get off mute. IDCEC, everyone can submit this to the IDCEC, but we have to register the attendees, correct?
Yes.
Yes. I have sent the contact list to Anne, and I have taken down attendance for the people that are live here throughout this presentation. So I do have an official attendance sheet I can submit to Anne, and when you do your speaker credits, you just submit that with it, and it records the people that were in attendance.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll just keep going. So it's noise, temperature, and air quality next, but those aren't very long sections, so we'll try to move through them a little bit faster. So the number of people who say they can't concentrate at their desk, well, it increased 16%. I mean, it just keeps increasing all the time, right? The more open spaces we get, the more problems we have with noise and a distraction. And a lot of people are looking for that quiet place to do focused work. I think sometimes now people are working at home, and that gives them the quiet space, and then they're going back. And so we're seeing more of that hybrid remote work. But we still want to pay attention to these things. Noise exposure, it's actually can be quite serious. I spent a little bit of time last year going through this, and I have an app on my phone. It's my phone. Where I can hold it up, and I always want to do it kind of the level where my ear is to get the true reading, but I've done it on airplanes when it seems loud, like when you're near the engine, everything, to try to see what are the decibels, what is my noise exposure. And so if anything is under 85, then it's really not a problem. What ends up happening is maybe you have a copier or a machine or something that you're putting into an area, and it actually produces, maybe it's 95 decibels, right? And so how can you take that away from the space? Can you put it in a room somewhere else? Can you put, like, if it's a I don't know, let's say a coffee grinder or something that maybe is 110 decibels. Can you put like some kind of sound masking around it? Do the people who are using it a lot, do they need hearing protection? That may be some kind of joint thing that you do with safety. But what kind of noise is being emitted, and what is exposure of the people in the environment and how they're getting it? And the way noise exposure works, you can't just test one thing and say, okay, well, that's the noise exposure, because you may have the running of the refrigerator, and you may have this, and you may have that. And so it's all together, right, to give you your dosage and what the exposure is. And we see this a lot for people who work, like if you were to do, like you said, event planning, like people who are working concerts or different things like that. Maybe they're bartending there, they're having a lot of noise exposure. So how can we protect them? So the open office, we have more frequent headaches in the open office, 2 times more than traditional offices. People get really stressed about privacy of conversations. Also their visual privacy. People are looking at my screen, talking in noise in the general while they're trying to concentrate and have a phone call. If I were talking here with you and I had other people doing things around me, it would be very hard for me to give you my full attention. And a lot of bleed over conversations in the background can come through. Sound, background music, city sounds, heating and ventilation and air conditioning is a huge deal. And I've worked with companies where they're trying to make it louder to sound mask, or they're trying to take it away. And so that's just something to think about it, but it all affects the users, because a lot of the users will comment like, I don't like the sounds I hear at the office. And when we put in a sound masking, they always said, when I'm in the bathroom, I feel like I'm taking off in an airplane because of the way that it kind of ramped up. Lack of sound privacy was a big drain on employee morale. That's something that we see. So just keeping in mind wherever you are, people, even if you're out at a restaurant, you want to be able to talk to the person you're talking with without like the person right maybe next door at the table hearing you. Things that we can do, the orientation of tables and places, special rooms where people can have more private, intimate talks, panels. Of course, there's physical walls. I'm sure you all know more about a lot of these things. I usually call someone when I need help with this, but a lot of times we've had a lot of people with the flooring. It echoes, different things like that. And so again, human performance, it affects people. Yeah, it's harder for them to hear. It affects them. They're more stressed out. Don't know how to say that. So so we've been, usually I work with someone else again on flooring stuff. But the one thing to keep in mind if you're doing flooring stuff to help with sound is if a person is in a standing environment, and they're standing on it, it's very like wood gives like a little bit of flexibility to stand on. It's easier to stand on, but when you get a rigid surface like a concrete or a marble or something, it's really hard on the legs and the body. So if you're looking for different floor things, you want to make sure how it affects them kind of feet up as well. Oops. Again, noise, lack of speech privacy, big complaints for the office. I guess maybe last year everyone was talking about PPE. I'm like, finally, everyone knows what PPE is besides safety and ergo people and risk management. I have little PPE laying everywhere. These are my ear protection. I mean, I make my son wear these when he mows the yard. I take them on planes. Now that I know how once you start to lose hearing, you can't get it back. right? And it's a slow cumulative progression. So protecting our hearing is really important. So you're pretty much, designers are kind of like the engineer in this to try to keep maybe the sound at bay and the noise exposure at bay. So there's two things with noise. There's the mental stress of the person, and then there's the loss of the hearing, right? So it's those two things. And this is just about covering sound by masking it or blocking it or absorbing it. And we get into the Wells standard, which talks about acoustic planning and things like that. Ceilings, vertical surfaces. And since we're kind of short on time, maybe we'll just share at the end if that's okay. Air quality. Well, I think this is one of the good things in the well building. And I think a lot of people after the COVID, there's going to be a huge focus on air quality and the ventilation systems. And I've been in places where you can actually see the air. And when you can see the air, you know it's bad, right? And maybe you're all not in those type of spaces because they seem to be more manufacturing floor where they're working with like a lot of chemicals and different things like that. However, this is something getting these good HEPA air filters and good filtration and stuff is really positive for human health. Sick building syndrome, I'm sure you all have heard of that. So a lot of different toxic things that can be in materials that are spec'd. So this is just talking about the different policies on that. Most of the time when it comes to air quality, it would never be an ergonomist to do it. It would be an industrial hygienist that we would call to test that. And we do call them, and some of us are ergonomists and industrial hygienists. I'm not one of them, but that's usually who I talk to, and they can come out and take readings and give specifications on that. Any kind of natural ventilation and things like that are good. But if you're in a place that has really bad outdoor air pollution, it may not be the same, right? And that's where it's good to talk to someone like an industrial hygienist. Control of the materials going through, low VOC paints, no carcinogens, things like that. I don't know how, do you all look at these things when you do design? Is this a big part of what you're doing with?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay.
especially now with COVID.
Okay.
Surfaces are a big deal.
Right. I know we just had some, I was testing these like different equipment and it had like a fabric on it. And they're like, well, we can't wipe it down with rubbing alcohol. So it's not going to work for us to have. So it's changed even some of the equipment that I was speccing, like how easy can it be cleaned, which we didn't worry about that as much anymore. You all will have this. I'll send this to you so you can see some of the different things. So I do think I've heard of a lot of people going to HEPA since COVID. So I don't know how much that's changed because I've been doing a lot of virtual stuff, but I think hopefully they're doing it. This is what the large insurance company, they have 30,000 employees. This is what their person recommended is that to do a full bake-in before occupants move down. So you spend a day with the heaters on full blast and then air out the facility. And that's what they do when they open up new spaces. And then they also said, again, this is the industrial hygienist. They have someone that's part of their program is they have someone come and analyze and check for all these different things. Oops. gonna move on. Thermal conditions. Okay. Well, a lot of people think temperature can affect their ability to work. I think we all know that's true. I'm not sitting on the heating pad now, but I do a lot because this room I'm in was an addition to my house. And so I have trouble keeping the temperature in here. And so that's one of the things when I work with people on setting up and I'm doing a home office evaluation, a lot of people will start in on like adjusting them to the workstation. I usually start in on the environment. Is the lighting right in that room? Is it a good place they can concentrate? How's the temperature in the room? And I try to see, is that the best spot in the house for them to work? And if it's not, try that first, and then we can get to the other things. So this is just talks about how people say they're less productive when they're in an office that's too warm or too cold. So this is where people say is pretty much the ideal temperature. However, researchers have found that men and women have about a 5-degree difference between them on comfort. So men are more comfortable in an office at 70 and women might be 75. And so this is, to me, I think it's very interesting. The occupational health says 68 to 76. And then the Cornell study 70 to 73. But then some people say it's high to 77. So you see, this is a huge range, right? And for seniors, it may be a little different. I know when I'm at my dad's house, he's 88. It's always so hot. I wake up in the middle of the night. So this study published its Journal for Nature Climate Change said that the formulas for temperature are based on this decades-old formula that use metabolic rates. Metabolic rates are different for females than males, so it makes sense that men are sometimes more comfortable in an environment where they're a little bit hotter and women are colder. And I've seen that in environments you go in and you've got one employee wearing a Snuggie and they're all like freezing and they have the space heaters. And temperature is a really important thing for people. We have seen whole wings of like a building when we've been in like lose power because so many women had space heaters plugged in at once that it puts a surge on the system. And then, I mean, they're down from computers, everything. So this isn't just even like, oh, okay, Chabella's less comfortable now. No, Chabella's space heater, collapsed our communication system. So like, how do we make her comfortable and able to work? And so these are just things to think about. So if you can find ways to have a good temperature and people more comfortable, then of course you want to do that. And it does affect how you can calculate things and learning and muscle efficiency, all sorts of different things if you're too hot or too cold. And since we're in a pinch on time, I'm just gonna skip that. And this is just a summary. From an ergonomist, we just focus on adjustability and flexibility when we can, keeping people in good postures and trying not to create with design anything where they're doing any kind of awkward reaches, using common sense. What are they going to be using? If it's heavy, keep it in the middle. If it's lightweight, you can put it up higher, right? Like doing things that won't strain the body, making sure that we have opportunities for people to move more and be healthier in other ways besides just the basic setup of how they are. And addressing other people, like we said, like hotels, like housekeepers, other people in the areas, people who clean the areas, people who do maintenance, and trying to get a little broader scope to hit that population. So are there any questions for me?
I don't see any in the chat. We're down to 13 people.
Okay.
And Anne, we totally appreciate you speeding up the presentation. And I've tried to explain we have no questions. We just want more. I want to thank you for a very informative CEU. And the people who left said they're sorry that they couldn't stay. I know we talked about having the Zoom be a little bit much for 3 hours. And
it is. From when I saw 3 hours, when I talked to him, I was like, 3 hours on Zoom? Oh my God.
Right. So you had mentioned to me that you did a lot of demonstrations. So you were going to be cutting it down more to 2. So that's where we ended up with the 11 to 1.
Okay.
And not as many breaks like you would have in a normal course. But we totally appreciate you speeding up for us. And
well, it's no problem. If anyone, I've posted my email. If anyone wants to reach out, if they want to ask a question about something or have me look at a design for something. I mean, you're all in so many different places. It was really hard for me to know how to tailor this because the other people that I have done this have been most office based. But if you have a question on food service or something like that, if I don't know it, I can also ask one of my peers who does more ergonomics in that area.
Well, your principles, as we mentioned before, can apply across the board on many levels in many areas. So we have to leave it up to our creative and ingenuity to apply what you've taught us into these different areas.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, thank you so much. And we really appreciate all your efforts and all participants. And
yay.
All right. Thank you. Bye, guys.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Have a great day. Thank you.